Hello, everybody. My name is Morgan Parbell, and today is the first episode in a podcast about food history. Today's episode is entitled Culinary Constructs Food, Gender, and Society. The research question that I'll be analyzing today is how have fictionalized characters reinforced gendered stereotypes within advertisements? But before we get too far, I'd like to introduce myself. Like I said, my name is Morgan Parbell. I'm a sophomore at Ohio State University, and I currently reside in Kent, Ohio. My current major is public health, with a special interest in sociology. I am pictured above on my podcast layout. I have short brunette hair about shoulder length. I'm wearing a black top, and I'm standing in a fall trail with sunny skies above me. I would also like to mention that this is an audio and visual accessible podcast. With that being said, in the description below, you will find a full length transcript, and whenever images take place on the above screen, I will also give a audio description. Now that that's done, let's get into the actual topic of today's episode. I'd like to start with mentioning what research communities and archives I've used in researching this topic. The first archive that I used and pulled from is the Food and History Archive. I also pulled images from the Women's Magazine collection in the Advertisement Archive. Today we'll be covering a variety of topics, including historical advertisements and food brands, and the influence they have on society gender roles, and the impact on modern mental health. I'd also like to introduce some key words and vocabulary phrases. The first is gender roles. Gender roles refer to society's expectations of people's behaviors and attitudes based on whether they are males or females. Gender stereotypes is the next word, oversimplified by widely held beliefs about the characteristics of males and females. The third the word that I would like to discuss is femvertising. This term refers to advertising that aims to challenge gender stereotypes and empowers women, as cited by one of my resources I'll be discussing at a later time. An example of this includes the Dove Real Beauty campaign. Here's one of the advertisements used in this campaign, entitled Real Women, Real Beauty, next to a Dove logo. Pictured as 8 women of all different sizes, ethnicities, and ages, wearing a variety of white clothing, most of it being full coverage bras and tank tops with white underwear. We will discuss more on the topic of femvertising in the future. However, I would like to note that many researchers and advertisement specialists have different types of feelings on the matter. A lot of people have disagreements on it, with some citing that this type of advertising can be positive to women and encourage positive mental health outcomes, while others think that it is marketing women's femininity. The final 2 words I'd like to discuss is body image and self-perception. While these 2 words are quite similar, body image specifically refers to how one feels and views their own body, while self-perception can be a larger, more broad term about how one views their self. Now that we've gone over keywords and vocabulary that we'll be using throughout this podcast, we can get into the first chapter entitled History of Food Advertisements, specifically relating to gender and racism. As we start getting into the first couple of sections of this topic, I've created a timeline presenting the different time periods that we will be discussing. The first is 16 to 1700s. The timeline graphic is on a pink background with flowers and papers as decoration, with a black line in the middle, featuring 4 different time periods: the 16 to 1700s, the 18 to 1900s, 1900 to 2000s, and 2000s and beyond. The first person I'd like to discuss, and the main person from this era, is Hannah Woolley. While she is not directly related to food advertisements, she was the first woman to profit from cookbooks, women's writings, and home medical remedies. In the 1600s, Woolley and her writings were known in most English households. She was the first woman to make literature for other women. In these books, she would discuss a variety of different topics, such as recipes, remedies, and life advice. Despite her popularity amongst many in the mid-17th century, she's forgotten by most in modern times. I am bringing her and her ideas to your attention now, to remember that despite many similar cooking books and recipes being discussed that were aimed to influence women to stay in their societal gender roles, Woolley was sort of an amazing resurgence of women, helping to bring women up. Many of her books and manuscripts were used to help educate women and young girls on home medicinal recipes and home health care, how to survive in English society, and how to survive in 17th century England. Here's one proposed photo of Hannah Woolley. While this may not be her, it is one of the most commonly attributed illustrations of potentially her. Also included is an excerpt from one of her books. She's seen here in a very old image with curly hair, a well-fitted corset dress, and is likely her family crest underneath the photo. This excerpt from one of her books is entitled The Accomplished Lady's Delight and was found in the Food History Archive. This book in particular includes chapters on preserving, physic, beautifying, and cookery. The pages are very worn. However, through preserving the records and throughout copying her transcripts, it is well preserved. The next chapter of history we'll be covering is the 1800s to 1900s, and we will be discussing the history of Aunt Jemima and also a trading card found from around the same period and discussing with comparative lens how that they are similar and different. For the first object for this part of history, I have the image and logo of the Aunt Jemima Baking and Pancake Mix brand. The logo features the character Aunt Jemima. In reality, her name was Nancy Green. The image has a black woman with a diamond cut covering with a happy smile on her face. The Aunt Jemima products are a household staple, especially in the 1900s and 2000s. However, what many did not know was that the woman behind the logo was a real woman named Nancy Green. Nancy, born as a slave in 1834, was one of the first black corporate models. Although she's the face of the advertisements, the lore behind her fictionalized character is almost entirely made up. As an example, here's a 1920 Aunt Jemima ad. In the photo, there is a text script depicting a story of a young white bride and husband on their honeymoon. In this story, the young bride loves watching Aunt Jemima cook her famous pancakes. Her new husband also loves pancakes as it is his favorite food. The story continues as the young couple's honeymoon ends. When they move into their own home, the bride finds she cannot make pancakes. Every time they'd come out wrong. The conclusion of the story ends with the advertised product being put in grocery stores. As quoted, "Nowadays, little brides have no such trouble. They can get the famous old Southern recipe itself, any grocery store. All the ingredients in just the proportion Aunt Jemima herself worked out, come ready mixed in Aunt Jemima's pancake flour." Before we start to analyze this text, I'd also like to talk for a minute on the surrounding images. Around the text are three different scenes from the tale. One depicting a young woman watching Aunt Jemima cook pancakes. The second, a young woman looking sad in the distance as her husband looks disgusted at the pancakes she made him. And the final image depicts a happy couple as the wife serves the husband a platter of Aunt Jemima pancakes. Finally, the last product image depicted in the bottom of the screen features two boxes of the Aunt Jemima product with the same black woman as discussed previously. Below her are the words, "I send town, honey." As this is a lot to unpack, let's start from the beginning of the advertisement. The story of the young white couple. This story portrays a stereotypical gender normative couple on their honeymoon. The role of Aunt Jemima in this story uses a sadly common black woman stereotype. It depicts her as a homely, motherly former slave, but instead of being unhappy with within white society and the treatment that was enforced upon her, she enjoys making the one happy. This is often used in many advertisements and films, both past and present. Instead of treating and advertising Black people, especially women, as being independent, politically active, and opinionated, they were reduced to a characterization that makes white people comfortable. The next aspect of the advertisement is the images. When looking through a comparative lens, we can see that the advertisement is not just pushing racial stereotypes, but also gender roles. The young wife is kept in the kitchen and only satisfied after pleasing her husband. Finally, the text below Aunt Jemima. This text, while maybe seemingly innocent at first, is perpetuating the stereotype that Black people are either illiterate or do not speak properly. This is also very harmful rhetoric. While this character is aimed to reduce Black women, it is important to remember the real face behind the fake name. Nancy Green's career allowed her the financial freedom to become an activist, run anti-poverty programs, and become one of the first Black missionary workers. My next object from the Food and History Archive is by the John and Carolyn Grossman collection from the 1900s. The trading cart advertisement depicts an illustrated scene of a family preparing for Thanksgiving. In this scene, the family is in a homely kitchen with a large window in the center of the room. On the right side of the kitchen, there's a seemingly older woman, perhaps in her late 60s, in a plaid skirt and shawl. With her is a motherly figure in a blue dress that is about knee length. They are both preparing a pie. On the left, there are four seemingly young women. One is putting the turkey in the oven, two preparing food on the stove top, and the last is holding what looks to be a loaf of bread. Near the window sill is a young girl in knee-length dress with black boots. She's pointing out the window. Outside, she seems to be pointing at an older gentleman, perhaps a father figure, butchering livestock. While this scene was produced in a similar time span as the Creation of Aunt Jemima, it depicts a similar yet different family scene. Well, the Aunt Jemima product advertisements used a characterized older black woman to sell their products. This trading card is selling a traditional family holiday, while women of all ages are in the kitchen doing the cooking and prepping for Thanksgiving. The only male in the illustration is outside butchering an animal. This is a key look into how gender roles of the time were continually being perpetuated by different forms of media. The third era being discussed is the 1900s and early 2000s. After World War II, boxed cake mixes became a very popular grocery store item for many women. While many women were initially reserved, Betty Crocker's brand advertising connected to many. The idea of a cake mix in a box that tastes just like homemade cake became a household staple. While many companies began marketing this idea, Betty Crocker led in its strategies. By creating a fictional woman, the brand sold cookbooks, pamphlets, and recipes that encouraged homemakers. That despite the reservations, using their product was a time saver and money saver. One way the branding changed to remedy these issues was by changing the mix's ingredients. When first put on shelves, many cake mixes only needed water to create the batter. However, after realizing that many women found this as a form of cheating when baking, they changed the mixture to need other ingredients such as eggs and oil. Here is one such Betty Crocker ad. In the advertisement, there's a picture of a woman, seemingly a face of Betty Crocker persona. She has short brown hair, wearing a green dress with a white lace overlay on her shoulders, and she's holding a plate of biscuits. This ad was published in 1920 and is gathered from the Food and History Archive. Underneath her is text that states, "What every woman should know about baking" by Betty Crocker. The final era of history we'll be covering is 2000s and beyond. With the changes in modern gender roles, so did modern advertisements change. In many different advertisements in modern day, gender stereotypes are still featured similar ways. However, they've shifted to how gender roles are typically now portrayed. This Green Giant ad was published in 2005 in the Women's Day magazine and was found in the Women in Advertising archive. This ad depicts three thin, attractive women eating the Green Giant food product, broccoli with cheese sauce. There's a white script overlaying the image saying, "What if you ate vegetables just because you like them?" Below the woman is a Green Giant banner featuring the product image on the left. It has the words "healthy for dinner," but with its delicious three cheese blend, you'll want it all the time for the love of the vegetable. Beside this, on the far right, is the company's mascot, a male green giant with bright white teeth and pieces of leafy vegetable as his hair. While this type of advertising plays a different role as previous ads, it plays a similarly harmful role. After analyzing these advertisements, we are now going to move on to the next chapter, entitled Influences on Gender Role. As stated previously, with the role of women in society changing, so do their gender roles. Although many modern forms of media have been moving to push femininity, equality, and diversity, many food brands have yet to make this change. Although brands like Betty Crocker and Aunt Jemima were created in years past, many of their products are still shaping how women perceive themselves. In 2021, due to backlash, criticism, and growing popularity of Black equality movements such as Black Lives Matter, brands such as Aunt Jemima, Miss Buttersworth, depicting stereotypical Black women, have since rebranded. However, many subtle aspects have yet to be changed. For example, the Betty Crocker brand still often depicts women as homemakers, yet they and other box baking mix companies still sell millions of products every year. This is often used as a marketing strategy, playing on one's subconscious mind. As quoted in Inticalo et al. In their article entitled titled Gender and Media Representations, a review of literature on gender stereotypes, objectification, and sexualization, published in 2023, they state the ambiguity of the media, the chronicity of individuals' exposure to it, and its role in shaping beliefs, attitudes, and expectations have made the subject of scientific attention. Through this article, the authors report that even through limited exposure to advertisements, the marketing effects can still lie within the mind, subconsciously influencing you on the product. While some of these types of ads may not be harmful, when specifically looking at advertisements that depict gender stereotypes, racial stereotypes, and body expectations, the mindset of many can still be putting themselves in these preconceived boxes. For example, the Aunt Jemima advertisement discussed earlier. In small text, quoted Aunt Jemima using improper grammar and spelling. While this may not seem the main focus of the pamphlet, it can reaffirm readers' beliefs that many Black women are uneducated. Similarly, the Green Giant advertisement in 2005 depicted thin women eating a microwavable meal with broccoli and cheese. This can cause women who view it to believe that they can control their diet and figure by eating these types of meals. And if they don't, it's their own problem, not the brand's. As discussed in the keyword section of the introduction, another popular form of advertisement uses femvertising. Femvertising is a very debated topic in this research community. One such scholar, Alan Abital, who believes that femvertising can often be harmful, states in his 2016 journal article entitled You Act Like a Girl, an examination of consumer perceptions of femvertising. He states, because femvertising messages promote gender equality, definitionally speaking and in principle, they can be considered feminist. However, they also explicitly encourage consumption of advertised products, which contradicts feminist scholars' belief that women empowerment is not simply a matter of money and purchasing choices, but also of the existence and enforcement of social policies and practices. Thus, femvertising messages contain an inherent conflict between its function as carriers of individual consumption and feminism's intrinsically political and social causes. However, on the opposing side, some scholars believe that promoting diversity in all types and aspects of femininity can shift the societal mindset and promote better self-perception. One such article, published in 2016 by Elisa Becker-Herby, entitled The Rise of Femvertising, Authentically Reaching Female Consumer, states, today's consumer is not only concerned with the authenticity of the product itself, but also with the motives and intentions of the company that created. This type of authenticity is most closely related to what Beverland et al. In 2008 refers to as a moral authenticity, explaining as providing the consumer with a feeling that this brand will help achieve self-authentication through connecting with personal moral values. Essentially, moral authenticity comes from understanding why a company would make and subsequently advertise a product. This author proposes that with diverse depiction of women, these advertisements are producing more authentic versions of products in their subsequent ads. In the same article, the author concludes that despite some negative contributions by making advertisings more authentic to the modern day woman, all types, sizes, and ages of women, their mental health may improve. While both these posit differing stances on the matter, it is often up to the individual to form opinions on brands, products, and advertisements. This leads us to our next chapter discussing this topic further. The third and final main chapter in this podcast is discussing the mental health impact of these advertisements. While looking back at the previous two authors and their debate on the femvertising topic, we could often, in both authors mention about how the mental health impacts women. Well, the first author, Alec Apatow, believes that these types of advertisements can cause women to have a negative self-perception and can often lead them to, again, view their body in negative form. The second author, Becky, believes that it could actually do the opposite, and it can actually lead to better mental health outcomes as people are seeing more modern forms of women in their natural state. In a separate study conducted by Dye et al. In 2025, in an article entitled The Impact of Advertising on Women's Self-Perception, a systematic review, the authors try to find the answer to these questions by analyzing different data from a multitude of different studies. They are quoted by saying, 17 studies probed into the effects of advertising on women's body image and self-esteem. Generally, exposure to femvertising campaigns was linked to more favorable body image perceptions and increased self-esteem compared to traditional advertising. Studies revealing that women's exposure to femvertising videos reported greater body satisfaction and self-compassion in comparison to those exposing to a traditional advertising video. Although the effects of these types of advertisements can differ from person to person, it is now generally recognized that most femvertising and diversity campaigns can generally produce better mental health outcomes to many women, especially if the company itself is promoting authenticity by changing the brand and providing a better structure and itself producing equality and diversity within their companies. Later in the article, when discussing traditional advertisements roles, Diodal states, our analysis reveals that traditional advertising, which often features idealized and stereotypical portrayals of femininity, continues to be associated with negative psychological outcomes, such as increased body dissatisfaction and self-objectification. To further promote his theory that traditional advertising is worse for the psychological outcomes of women, he found that 63 out of 95 studies analyzed found consistent repercussions of advertising on women's body image and self-objectification. These mental health impacts, compared to femvertising, are often worse. In conclusion, with both traditional advertisements depicting gender role stereotypes and femvertising on the rise, it is important to remember that despite preconceived notions and subconscious marketing strategies, that as a society, our ads and media should continue to grow with us as gender roles in society changes. Without this, mental health impacts of traditional advertising could lead to women to continue following these stereotypes and the factors that contribute, such as fear of not being accepted by society and thinking that if you don't fit these stereotypes, you may not be as good of a woman. It could also lead to further social comparison. So even though femvertising and advertising similar to it may not be a perfect solution, with continuing change and rebranding and restructuring from different companies, it could lead to a better outcome in the world. This is the end of the podcast. I'd like to say thank you all for listening. I'd also like to remind you that in the description of this video, there is a transcript link below with everything written out, and there's also a list of all my resources provided if you'd like to read into it any further. For anyone interested in further research, I'd also like to promote the two archives that I used in the research of this video, including the Food and History Archive and the Women's Magazine Collection in the Advertisement Archive. For anyone looking to either learn more about this research community or join it, I highly recommend clicking on the references I listed in the description, including Diet Yao. He gives a great description of some of the interesting mental health impacts of traditional and femvertising advertising, as well as data analysts. Thank you all for listening.